This is why I don't do tags, because in a book tag, all I do is explain why I can't give you a good answer. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do the mid-year book freakout tag that I also did last year, and that a lot of creators around booktube do every single year without fail. And for me, this is basically the point in time where I tell you how much I've not read in the current year. So I've read 31 books so far this year, which is really bad for me. If I were to double that, I would have 62 books read for the entire year. That is a very low number for me. And so I'm not feeling great about myself. I'm feeling like I need to kick it into high gear going forward. But I am also trying to be a little bit lenient on myself given everything that has happened in 2020, worldwide, nationwide, and actually in my own personal life as well. It's been a tough year. 30 books. I have to answer 13 questions out of a pool of just 30 books. And let's see how this goes. So question number 1 is, what is the best book that you've read so far in 2020? And I've read 3 5-star books. They are When You Disappeared by John Marrs, Hangman by Jack Heath, and Columbine by Dave Cullen. And I went back and forth. Columbine is obviously a nonfiction. I think it is a book that's fantastically written and really informative. So for nonfiction, yes, it's phenomenal. It's not the only nonfiction that I've read this year. Yes, it is. So I find it hard to compare a nonfiction 5-star to a fiction 5-star. To me, that's apples and oranges. So Columbine is phenomenal, but I'm primarily a fiction reader. So my favorite fiction book that I've read so far in 2020 is When You Disappeared by John Marrs. This is one of those weird 5 stars where it's kind of upsetting. It's kind of a very painful book and a very unsettling book to read, but it's done so well that you give it 5 stars and you think about it over and over and over again, and that's kind of how it ends up becoming one of your favorites and one of the best. So John Marrs is just killing it for me. I really love John Marrs. We're not done talking about him. We'll be back. Question number 2 is the best sequel that you've read so far in 2020. I've only read 1 sequel in 2020, and it was absolute garbage. That book was Conviction by Corinne Michaels, and it's the sequel to Consolation. And I had so many issues with it. To sum it up, basically, there was zero need for the sequel of this book. This sequel was 100% pure money grab. It had no meat to the story. I was not happy. So considering that's the only sequel that I've read this year, I guess you can qualify it as the best, but it's bad. Just saying. Question number 3 is a new release that you haven't yet read that you really want to. That is What Lies Between Us by John Marrs. This was an anticipated read. It was an definite automatic pre-order. I had forgotten that I pre-ordered it with everything going on, so it arrived at my house one day and I was super excited. It made me super happy. But this is the story of 2 women, one of whom is being held captive in an attic of the other woman, and there's some secrets and some dirt between them. What lies between us. So I do want to make time for this, absolutely. I just don't know when. I just don't know. I'm trying. Question number 4 is the most anticipated release for the second half of this year. I'm all over some of the books that are coming out. He Started It by Samantha Downing is one that I'm really looking forward to because her debut novel was a 5-star read for me. Alex North has another book coming out. It's called The Shadows. It's another crime thriller that takes place in the same setting or area that The Whisper Man did. I really liked The Whisper Man. That was a 4-star read for me. Dionne has another book coming out. I really liked her novel, The Marsh King's Daughter, and so I'm looking forward to the new release. It's called The Wicked Sister. There are just a ton. Paul Tremblay's got one coming out. There's no way that I will be able to read all of the new releases that I'm actually anticipating. I will leave my anticipated reads videos linked in the description box if you want to check out the ones that I'm super duper looking forward to. Question number 5 is, what has been your biggest disappointment so far in 2020? And there have been a few disappointing reads. Probably the most disappointing is The Other People by C.J. Tudor. And it just barely beats out Elevator Pitch by Linwood Barclay. But it was more disappointing because I had experience with C.J. Tudor. I read The Chalk Man by that author and loved it. Elevator Pitch, I had never read that author, so how disappointed could I be that it didn't meet my expectations? But The Other People was just, it was hyped. It had a really good concept. Like, the synopsis made the concept sound really creepy and strong and interesting and different. And yet the book ended up being about something different and not really delving into the most interesting parts that the synopsis promised. And so it was also kind of, it was all over the place. There was a lot of stuff jammed in that book. If that book were a suitcase, there's just a lot of stuff. Very confusing to read. I read it as an arc, and I'm glad that I did, because I definitely would have purchased it and then probably would have been even more disappointed if I had shelled out my own money. Question number 6 is, what has been the biggest surprise so far of 2020? And does the surprise have to be good? Can a surprise be bad? I don't want to be all negative, but dang. Okay, I'll tell you what the biggest surprise was. The biggest surprise, not in terms of, I can't believe I liked this book, I had no idea I was going to like this book. That's not the case. To me, the biggest surprise I've experienced in 2020 is not realizing something about a book that I was reading. So Hangman by Jack Heath, I talked about it very recently on my channel. I will also link the video review for that book. But I had no idea going into it that the main character was a cannibal. And so you learn very early in the book that he is, but it would have changed. I definitely still would have read the book because it was a book that I really anticipated loving. Turns out I loved it. So that, in that regard, it wasn't a surprise. It didn't shock me that I liked it. But I just went into the book expecting something very particular. But when the author hit me over the head with the fact that the main character eats people, I wish so badly that somebody had seen my reaction to that, because it had to be priceless. There must have been shock written all over my face. And that's been my biggest surprise. If you want to know a book that I thought that I would feel one way about and was surprised that it was something different, probably The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. And the reason that was a good surprise, and I think the reason that I maybe put off reading the book, is because I knew going in that it was a dual timeline. And if I read too many dual timelines, I get real sick of them real fast. It's just not my cup of tea. And so I'm extra critical of books that have a dual timeline, and I just try to avoid them unless I know that I'm really, really interested in the story. I was never distracted by the fact that it was a dual timeline. I was equally invested in both timelines of this book, which, believe me, almost never happens for me. I mean, it's not going down in history as one of my favorite books. I think I gave it like a 3.5 or a 4 star. I think it was 3.5. I think I gave it a 3.5 star because I did like it, but most of what I liked about it was that it didn't disappoint me in the ways that I thought that it would. Question number 7 is favorite new author. This one is also tough for me. This is why I don't do tags, because in a book tag, all I do is explain why I can't give you a good answer. But declaring someone my favorite author takes a while, as we've seen, because I have done a couple of videos where I've purposefully read a large pool of books in order to determine if somebody was my favorite author, because I don't have a lot of author loyalty. And so I pick up one book here, one book there, and it's really hard for me to say that I know someone's body of work enough to declare them my favorite author. I will tell you that I'm intrigued by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo at the tail end of 2019. And then I read One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid this year, and loved Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, liked One True Loves. So I'm intrigued by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I did decide this year that John Mars is one of my favorite authors, but I kind of suspected that, but I did cement that. Again, I thought Simone St. James wrote beautifully. I think Taylor Adams writes beautifully, even though I didn't like No Exit. I wasn't a huge fan of No Exit. I'm excited to read more by Jack Heath. I'm excited to read more by Alma Katsu. So yeah, that's what I got for you. And when it comes to authors. Question number 8 is your new fictional crush. And I don't have one of these either. There's been a big gap this year in my romance reads. I read several in January, and then I didn't read another one until May. And so normally that's where I would get my fictional crushes from, let's be honest, is the romance books that I'm reading. So there are two romance heroes that I think were great in the books that they were in. I don't know if I would go as far as to say that I have crushes on these folks, on these fellas, but Reid from the book Love Lettering by Kate Clayborn. He was a financial guy who was spending a lot of time with this artist. So their dynamic was interesting. Reid was interesting. He was always a little sad, you always felt bad for Reid. You always wanted to rescue Reid. So there was Reid. He was pretty decent. And then Theo from the recent romance that I read, Well Suited. I had commented on what a nice guy he was. He's just a good guy. He was raised right. He's, a good guy. And that's always attractive. So question number 9 is who is my newest favorite character from a book in 2020. And I think that I do have to go with Timothy Blake, our cannibal, just because he's outlandish and it's fresh in my mind, and how addictive the story was. And he's so outlandish, and he's definitely not a guy that he's a complicated guy. This is a complicated dude, and I'm always down for that. I like a morally ambiguous character, one that is not always sitting on the right side of life. So he's the character that I want to know more about, and luckily he has his own series, so I can learn more about him. 2020 is almost shaping up to be the year of unlikable characters, because a lot of the books that I've read have had unlikable characters. We'll have to see. We'll see if the rest of the year contributes to this list that I have formed already of unlikable characters. Question number 10 is a book so far this year that has made me cry. I don't recall crying in any book that I've read so far in 2020. If I did, it was When You Disappeared by John Mars. It was definitely the one that drilled down into my soul and killed part of it. If I cried, it was during that book, but I don't recall doing so. And I can usually say with confidence when I've cried and when I haven't. Like looking back on 2019, I can tell you the books that made me cry. Those experiences tend to stick with me. So if there's not anything sticking in my mind right now, I'm pretty sure I haven't cried yet, which could be part of my problem. Maybe I need a good cry out of a book. Question number 11 is a book that made you happy. Being happy, it's such a simple emotion, right? And the only books that I know for a fact make me happy, or the only books that I read to be happy, are romance novels. And the two most successful romance novels that I've read this year are Love Lettering by Kate Clayborn and Well Suited by Staci Hart. And there are some books that are definitely not happy books that still make me happy because I enjoy the crap out of not being happy. What? No. I enjoy a book that makes me feel strongly in any way. And so I end up the side effect sometimes of a super scary book or a super emotional or upsetting or suspenseful book. Like sometimes the side effect to those books are happy because I can walk away knowing I've been affected by the book and be happy about that. And that's happened a lot this year. I mean, that's happened The Hunger, Columbine, Fantastic Land, Hangman, The Passengers, When You Disappeared, The Good Samaritan. I mean, so all of those experiences were happy ones, and probably more happy than the books that made me happy, where happiness was you know what I'm trying to say. Number 12 is, what is the most beautiful book you've bought this year? This was hard. But I did settle on this one, The Return by Rachel Harrison. Not a super impressive cover design, but there's just something about this hot pink that I'm living for. I am not a pink fan. Like, I'm pretty sure that this book by Rachel Harrison could very well be the only pink thing that I own. And I love it. This hot pink little number is floating around my house, and it's in random places in my house all the time. And inevitably, without a doubt, when I walk past and I see this hot pink book, I instantly get happy. Like, it instantly makes me happy. And it's a really weird experience. It's a really weird thing to admit. And so that is beautiful to me. That's beautiful. Anything that makes me happy every time I see it, love it. And finally, the one question that I can definitely answer for you without a doubt in this entire list of questions, number 13, is what books do you need to read by the end of the year? I have them here. I've pulled them. These are books that in 2019 I told you I would definitely read in 2020. Like I'm the boss of me or something, because I haven't read them yet. The Wanderers by Chuck Wendig. The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley, and now Lucy Foley has released another book that I also need to read. And the Wayward Children's Series by Seanan McGuire. There was more on that original list, but if I can get through those, I'm going to consider it a win. Because here we are, halfway through the year, and something, as always, that I've declared I was going to do, I have not done. I also need to read What Lies Between Us by John Mars. Oh, yeah, and I have big plans to do another Is So-and-so My Favorite Author? So I have 4 books that I want to read, that I need to read by the end of 2020. I want that video to be out there in the universe before the end of this year, so I have those to read as well. So, you know, I'll just be over here reading, or not reading, as it were. I haven't watched anybody else's mid-year tag yet, but I'm hoping, I would suspect that either people have read more this year than they've ever read in their entire lives, or that, like me, people can't read. People can't read because this shit is too intense. That's That's my defense. Shit is too intense. So me and my 30 books are over here doing the mid-year book freakout tag. Hope you're having a good reading year. Hope if you're not, that this video made you feel better about it. Made you feel like you're not the only one who's not having the best reading year. Let me know some things down in the comment section below, like the best book you've read so far this year, or even the worst. Are there any books that I've talked about that you've read this year? Did you get any good recommendations from me? Those are all things that I'm dying to know. Leave them down in the comment section for me. Check out the links in the description box to the other videos that I mentioned, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you all very soon.